The night was unusually quiet on the outskirts of town, the kind of silence that feels heavy, broken only by the hum of street lamps and the occasional barking of a distant dog. Ethan Brooks, a worn-out mechanic, was closing up his small garage after a long day of work. His clothes were smeared with grease, his hands cracked from years of labor, and his wallet was nearly empty. Business had been slow. Most of his neighbors drove shiny new cars straight to the dealership for repairs, leaving Ethan struggling to make ends meet. Still, he never complained. He just worked every day because fixing cars was all he knew, and because his little daughter depended on him. As he locked up, he caught the unmistakable sound of screeching tires, followed by a violent crash down the road. For a moment, Ethan froze. Then the smell of smoke hit the air. He didn't think twice. He grabbed the fire extinguisher from his garage and ran. At the edge of the highway, an SUV had flipped onto its side, flames licking at the hood. The driver was still inside, struggling with the seatbelt. Through the cracked windshield, Ethan caught a glimpse of a man in a suit, trapped, panicked. "Hang on!" Ethan shouted, rushing forward. The heat seared his skin as he yanked on the door handle. It wouldn't budge. He smashed the glass with a wrench from his pocket and crawled halfway in, coughing from the smoke. The man was fading fast, his lips whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. With brute strength, Ethan slashed the jammed seatbelt using his knife, then pulled the stranger free, just as the flames roared higher. They collapsed together on the pavement, gasping for air as the SUV exploded behind them. The man's eyes fluttered open, filled with disbelief. You saved my life." Ethan brushed it off, coughing. Anyone would have done it, but deep down he knew not everyone would. He had lost everything once before in a house fire years ago. His wife hadn't survived. Maybe that was why he couldn't walk away this time. The paramedics arrived, rushing the injured man into the ambulance. Before leaving, the stranger gripped Ethan's hand tightly. "What's your name?" "Ethan," he muttered. Then the ambulance sped off, leaving Ethan standing alone in the smoky night. 2 weeks later, Ethan was back at his garage, tightening bolts on an old truck. He hadn't told anyone about the accident. To him, it was just something he had to do. That morning, a line of black luxury cars pulled up outside. Ethan wiped his hands nervously as several men in suits stepped out. From the back emerged the man he had saved, this time clean, sharp, and commanding. It turned out the stranger was Daniel Carter, a billionaire CEO whose face often appeared on the covers of business magazines Ethan never read. Daniel walked up to him with a look that was part gratitude, part determination. "Ethan, you didn't just pull me out of that SUV, you gave me back my life. And I'm not going to forget it." Ethan tried to shrug it off, but Daniel continued, "I did some digging. You've been keeping this place running on nothing but grit and heart. You've got skill but no support. That ends today." To Ethan's shock, Daniel announced that he was investing in Ethan's garage, turning it into a state-of-the-art auto repair and restoration shop. He also offered Ethan a partnership in one of his companies, giving him not just money, but a chance to secure his daughter's future. Ethan stood speechless, tears stinging his eyes. All he could manage was, "Why me?" Daniel smiled. "Because you reminded me that humanity matters more than profit. You risked everything for a stranger. The world needs more men like you." Years later, Ethan's shop became the talk of the town, employing dozens of workers and giving struggling mechanics a place to thrive. His daughter grew up proud of her father, not just because he was successful now, but because he never lost the heart that drove him to save a life without asking for anything in return. And Daniel Carter, he often stopped by, not as a CEO, but as a friend. Whenever reporters asked him about the turning point in his life, he didn't mention business deals or boardrooms. He talked about a poor mechanic who ran toward fire when everyone else would have walked away. Because sometimes it takes a man with nothing to remind those with everything what really matters. The memory of that night never left Ethan. Sometimes, when the world grew quiet, he'd still hear the shattering glass, feel the heat of the flames biting at his arms. But more than fear, what stayed with him was the moment Daniel Carter looked into his eyes, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had just been given a second chance. At first, Ethan struggled to accept the help. Pride had carried him through lean years, and taking charity, no matter how generous, felt like betraying that. But Daniel wasn't offering a handout. He was offering partnership, respect, and a chance to rebuild. So Ethan said yes. The transformation was almost unreal. Within months, the dingy little garage with flickering lights and rusted tools became a gleaming workshop, filled with top-grade equipment and steady work orders. For the first time in years, Ethan could pay his bills on time. He could take his daughter out for ice cream without worrying if it meant skipping a utility payment. But more than money, what warmed him most was the community it created. Daniel had insisted on keeping the business rooted in the town, hiring local men and women who needed a shot at honest work. Ethan trained them himself, patient and encouraging, passing along not just skills, but dignity. He made sure no one was left behind the way he had once been, and Daniel, he didn't just disappear back into his world of boardrooms and skyscrapers. He came often, sitting in the shop's small office, tie loosened, laughing with the mechanics. Sometimes he and Ethan would talk late into the night about life, loss, and the strange twists of fate that brought people together. In those moments, the billionaire and the mechanic were just two men, grateful to be alive. One evening, years later, Ethan stood outside the shop, watching his daughter, now a young woman, wave goodbye to the workers as they left. She was smiling, her eyes bright with hope for a future far better than the one he had once feared she'd inherit. Daniel pulled up beside him, stepping out of a sleek black car.